Díomh agus fáilte. Hello and welcome to this part of your historical tour, where we take in the area of Dromkeen and its hinterland. Dromkeen, from the Irish Dromkeen, meaning the pleasant ridge, has featured prominently in the county's and indeed country's history down the years. And today you will hopefully add a little extra to your knowledge and appreciation of this community's special contribution in these regards. When, as part of your tour today, you will pass the grounds of Dromkeen House, the ancestral home of the DeBourgh's family. Its current occupants, Graham and Florence Brown, bought the house and farm of some 56 acres in 1991 from the last of that famous family's line, Dorothy Hussey DeBourgh, now deceased. We greatly appreciate and acknowledge their time and their efforts and their courtesy shown to us when we visited there recently. Gora Mahagwev, and enjoy the rest of your tour.
Hi Graham.
Hello there.
I'm pleased to meet you. Graham, thank you very much for having us here today.
You're very welcome.
Graham is currently living in Dromkeen House, and we're here today, and Graham is going to talk to us about, I suppose, life here in the house going back to centuries. So Graham, would you start off and maybe tell us a little bit about what you know about this house?
Well, yes, it's a house that was built in 1702. It's a Queen Anne house, a classical Queen Anne house. It was built because the old fortified house was burned down after the first siege of Limerick in 1690. As they withdrew, they burned the places that King Billy stayed at, you see. And the family Burke moved to Old Town near Naas, and they took most of the dressed stone from the old fortified house down there to build a new dwelling, which incidentally was never finished. They never built the main central block, and yet Thomas Burke, who lived at Old Town, built this and restored Dromkeen, so it obviously had importance with the family.
With family. And you mentioned, Graham, that one of the royal kings stayed here at one stage.
Well, he did, yes. After the Battle of the Boyne, King William came here with Ulick Burke, who had fought with him, and sieged Limerick, you see, sieged the city in 1690. It's fairly well documented. There's 2 or 3 books on the subject. There's no doubt that he was here, and we're finding proof of it, you know.
Okay. What kind of proof have you found when you have looked around the place here and that he stayed here?
Well, you can imagine if the king was here, and not in this house, in a very big house covering a large area. If the king was here, there'd be a great retinue of soldiers to protect the guy, you know. And we've discovered where the officers were camping, because we dig up little silver coins, and we discovered where the ordinary soldiers were camping, because we dig up copper coins. And before they went to the front each morning, they'd push the coins under the sod, you see. They didn't want the Irish, if they were killed, they didn't want the Irish to take any benefit from it. And if they came home, that was okay. But if they didn't come home, we can dig them up.
So you've been lucky to find a few of these coins.
Well, we have. But the nice thing is that it confirms the story.
Yes.
It's not. Yeah. They're not hugely valuable in any shape or form. Right. That's an Elizabethan sixpence, which of 1591. But they don't have huge value, but they confirm what the historians have told us in the story.
Graham, you've told me that there's been human occupation here for quite some time, and we have evidence of it here. Perhaps you might show us what you have here.
Well, this is a quern stone for grinding corn.
Okay.
It would be the other way up, sitting in and you'd turn it.
Right. And there's a hole in the middle. That's
the stuff that's the surface that ground your corn,
Okay,
and
we'll
the
just turn
corn
it up that
came through the hole.
Okay.
And that's about 2,300 years old. And that was
Where was
just
that
dug out of a ditch. I was clearing a ditch in the cow pasture,
Okay.
and up it came in the bucket.
Okay.
Yep.
Now we also have here a piece of a metal object.
Well, that came up in the same area, and it looks to be an iron cooking, the base of some kind of iron cooking pot.
Right.
That's what it looks like to me.
So Graham, we've now come to the next oldest part, which is the tower we mentioned there a couple of seconds ago. And this is the tower. Perhaps you might tell us how old this tower is here, do you think?
Well, the first written reference to the tower was in 1320. It would appear to have been an old tower going way back, you know, because it was a moated tower. It had a spring outside of it, which is still flowing, and it would be the dwelling place of the Burkes in the early days. That's where they would live when they developed and became strong and built the new house, and they wanted a big, strong building that showed who they really were. They were still Catholics, and this was turned into a church. It was quite a big church. We see a window which was probably for lepers to take communion through.
That's the window there now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they were Catholics until Protestantism came to England, and their hearts were Tudor hearts. The Burkes were really the
Right.
Tudors, you know. Yeah.
So when they converted to Protestantism, this church became disused, and they built a Protestant church across the field. Is
They
that right?
did, yes, where the
Right.
graveyard is now in Dromkeen.
You said in your excavating around here, you came across a holy water font attaching to this building here, the first church.
Yes, I did. I didn't know there was a spring supplying a moat here. It had all been filled in, you see. And as I dug out the moat, so I found the spring. And in the spring had been thrown the holy water font.
Yeah.
The courtyard here, on the ground here, we see it's cobbled. Could you tell me a little bit about the origins of the cobbling here and the courtyard?
Well, to be honest, I've no evidence as to when it was laid down. It was certainly 1702 when the house was built, at least, and it could have been before that, because I mean, cobbles have been used for 500, 600, 700 years.
Yeah. And down at the end of the yard here, we have a thatched house.
Yeah.
Would that be a much more recent development?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah. And what year would you kind of put that to?
Well, the walls were shuttered at the period when the Burkes were making silage. They were the first people in Ireland to make silage,
Okay.
and they wrote a book on round silage towers and how to build them. And
Okay.
they just went daft with shuttered concrete.
Right.
And it was,
And we have, in another part of the farm, we have the remains of that silage pit.
oh, we have, absolutely, yeah.
And that was in the early part of around 1910.
1912, I think the book was written,
Okay.
and it was called The Ensilage of Grass.
Okay. And that book was published as being the first really silage makers in Ireland.
Absolutely, and you wouldn't believe it, but as a lad of 14, I went to a farm school, and we used that book to learn how to make silage.
Yeah. And we also looked at a wheel that we had here.
Yes.
Now, will you tell me a little bit about that wheel?
Well, we were digging to build a retaining wall, and the bucket of the digger hit this stone, and as we dug it out, it's a round wheel with a loose stone in the centre. And we puzzled what it was, but apparently it is for making cartwheels,
Right.
for heating the iron rim and then putting the wooden wheel inside the iron rim and then pouring water onto it, and it contracts and holds the whole thing together.
Graham, as we came in along, I could see a shield on the gate. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, well, Odo Burke, that's William and Richard's brother. There was the three brothers, you remember, 1066. He led the first crusade to the Holy Land. And I think it was on the second or third crusade that one of the Burkes had done surprisingly well in battle. And Richard Coeur de Lion, he dipped his hand in the blood of a Saracen, put it on his shield, and said, "That is your shield for all time."
And made a sign of the cross as such
Yeah,
on it.
it's a yellow shield with a red cross, and the motto over the years has been salvation from the cross.
So that's the Burke motto
That's
as such.
the Burke motto for this area,
Yeah,
the Clan William Burke.
And so, Graham, we've now come to the front of your residence, and you tell us earlier on that it is Queen Anne residence, a Queen Anne type building. What are the characteristics of a Queen Anne building?
Well, when you look at the outside, the windows are a particular size. You can see here the small windows,
Right.
and they're the original windows to the house. And that tells you it's a Queen Anne house from the outside at first glance.
Right.
You go inside, you would then measure the stair. You would measure the depth of the stair and the height of the stair. And that is particular to a Queen Anne house as well. And that is, the stair measurement is right. It's a gentle stairway in Queen Anne times. Now the thing would be, you see, that in 1702 you'd be inviting your friends for tea, and you'd be inviting Catholic friends, and of course they were only allowed to come on a £5 horse, whereas you could have whatever, you could have the Ferrari of horses, you know. And the thing was, you built a ha-ha at the end of your grass, so that it merged with the field.
So perhaps you might describe what a ha-ha is.
Well, it's a big trench. There's one up there, and it stops the horses coming onto the garden, but there's no fence. And the idea being, you see, that evangelism in those days wasn't to get people introduced to the Lord Jesus, it was to get them into your church. And it just shows really how upside down the world was.
Graham, as I look to my left here, at the entrance, there's a big stone arch as we come in. Can you tell me the history of that, please?
Well, it's called a medieval gateway. The fortified house that was built after they used the tower. There's a huge foundation of a wall going up, way up there. I don't know how far it goes. They have dug out two huge blocks of stone from the side of that arch. So I don't think it was the only way in to the centre of the medieval house. But that's all that's left of it, you see. That's the place that King Billy stayed in, and that's all that's left.
Okay.
That's covered by a preservation order.
All right, okay. That's very interesting. Now, but before we finish this particular aspect here, your house and site here is overlooked by the ambush site of 1921.
Oh, yeah.
And you would have been, or your building, your house would have been in the firing line for some aspect of that.
Yeah.
And there is evidence here, you tell me,
Yeah.
of some of the bullet holes, etc.
Yeah, well, you can see them on the house wall,
Right.
because that house hasn't been re-rendered in the last 100 years. There's also a bullet hole in the shutter of the far end room,
Okay.
and you can line it up with the church, because it took out the upright of the window, and that's
Right.
been replaced, you know, so
Oh, yes.
you could actually work out where the guy was standing when he fired the bullet at the ambush. Yeah.
Right. Well, we'll take a look at that now. So, thank you.